Amara lived in a small, colourful house in Kumasi, Ghana. She was the kind of girl most people didn't notice. Quiet, always reading, always thinking. But behind her silence was a brilliant mind and a heart that just wanted to be loved, especially by Kojo, her stepfather. Ever since her real father passed away, Amara had tried her best to be the kind of daughter Kojo would be proud of. She cleaned the house before he got home, brought him water when he sat down, and made sure her grades were the best in her class. But no matter what she did, it never seemed to be enough. The only person Kojo seemed to see was Zina, Amara's cousin, who had come to live with them after her parents died in a car crash. Zina was beautiful, loud, and always smiling. Everyone loved her, especially Kojo. He praised her constantly, called her his real daughter in front of guests, and bought her little gifts even when there was no occasion. Amara would smile through it, but deep inside, it hurt. Sometimes she wondered if Kojo even remembered she lived in the same house. She kept trying. She thought, maybe if I do better, he'll notice me too. But it didn't matter if she won school awards or helped her mother cook dinner. Zina was always the one Kojo clapped for. And Amara, she was just the girl they always overlooked. And slowly, she began to feel invisible in her own home. Amara never asked for much. All she ever wanted was for Kojo to see her, not just with his eyes, but with his heart. But that day never came. In their house, Kojo acted like Zina was the only daughter he had. He would smile proudly when Zina walked into a room saying things like, "Look at how beautiful she is," or "She's so graceful, just like a queen." When guests came over, he would pull Zina close, introduce her with pride, and shower her with compliments. Amara would be sitting quietly in the corner, waiting to be seen, but Kojo never mentioned her. Sometimes he didn't even say her name. Even in family photos, Kojo made it clear who mattered. Amara remembered one day when they took a picture at a cousin's wedding. She stood between her mother and Zina, smiling shyly. Later, when the photo was printed and hung in the hallway, Amara was gone, cropped out, as if she had never been there at all. She stared at that picture for weeks. The empty space where she once stood screaming louder than any insult. Kojo didn't need to yell at her. His silence was louder than shouting. He called her too plain, said she didn't have the charm or beauty that Zina had. Once, in front of relatives, he said, "Zina brings light into this house. Some people are just there." Amara knew exactly who he meant. She bit her tongue, held back tears, and smiled like it didn't matter. But it did. Her mother stayed quiet, always looking nervous when Kojo spoke that way. Amara could see the fear in her mother's eyes, the way her hands shook when Kojo was angry. And so, Amara never complained. She just kept everything inside. Her sadness, her anger, her hope. She told herself, maybe one day he'll be proud of me too. But deep down, a part of her was starting to understand the truth. Kojo wasn't really a father. He was just a man in the house. A man who made her feel small, unwanted, and invisible. And the worst part, he didn't even notice the pain he caused. The day Amara found out she was the top student in her entire school, she ran home with her certificate held tightly in her hands. Her heart was racing with excitement. Maybe this time, she thought, Kojo will finally be proud of me. She stepped into the house, smiling from ear to ear, and held out the paper. "I came first," she said softly, her voice filled with hope. Kojo barely looked up from the TV. He glanced at the certificate, gave a small nod, and said, "Okay, but it's not like that will make you famous." Then he went back to watching football. No hug, no smile, no "well done," just silence. Amara stood there, her hand slowly dropping to her side. She had worked so hard, studying late at night, helping around the house, never complaining. She thought that maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment he saw her. But it wasn't. Just a week later, Zina got called for a local modeling gig. Nothing big, just a small shoot for a boutique in town. But Kojo acted like she had won an international award. He told all the neighbors, called his friends, and even planned a party to celebrate. Amara watched as balloons went up and music filled the house. People danced and laughed, and Kojo toasted to his shining star. Amara stayed in her room, listening to the noise through the walls, her certificate now tucked inside a drawer. The worst part came later. Amara overheard Kojo talking to her mother about needing money for a dress for Zina's shoot. Her mother hesitated, and said they were saving that money for Amara's school fees. But Kojo brushed it off. "What's the point of school if she's just going to stay average?" he snapped. And just like that, the money meant for Amara's future became Zena's dress. That night, Amara cried quietly under her blanket, not just because of the dress or the party, but because she realized her dreams didn't matter to him. No matter how hard she worked, how high she climbed, Kojo would never see her. Her dreams were real, her efforts were real, but in his eyes, she was invisible, and that hurt more than any failure ever could. Every morning before the sun rose, Amara was already in the kitchen, scrubbing pots and boiling water for the house. She swept the compound, washed clothes, cleaned every room, while Zena lay in bed, scrolling through her phone. Amara cooked breakfast, served it to Kojo and Zena, and quietly ate the leftovers, if there were any. It was like she had stopped being a daughter and had become the househelp. No one asked if she was tired. No one said thank you. This was just her life now. When university admission letters came in, Amara's heart beat fast. She had been accepted. Her dream was to study law, to finally make something of herself. She showed the letter to Kojo with a tiny smile, hoping, just hoping, he would support her this time. But he only laughed. "Who will cook and clean if you go to school?" he said, not even looking at the paper. "Your job is here. Don't let books confuse you." Her mother sat quietly in the corner, eyes glued to the floor. Amara turned to her, waiting for her to say something, to defend her, to fight for her, but nothing came. Her mother looked broken, scared of Kojo, and too tired to fight anymore. That silence cut deeper than words. Zena, on the other hand, kept getting everything she wanted. She didn't lift a finger in the house. Kojo called her a queen and told Amara to serve her well. When guests visited, Amara brought water and food while Zena sat with them smiling, praised like a princess. Amara stood in the background like she didn't even belong in her own home. At night, when everyone was asleep, Amara would sit by the small window in her room and write in her old notebook. It became her secret world. She wrote about her pain, her anger, her loneliness, but she also wrote about her dreams, about standing in court as a lawyer, helping girls like herself, and breaking free from the cage Kojo had built around her life. She didn't know how or when, but something inside her whispered, "This isn't the end." Every word she wrote was a promise to herself. One day, she would rise, and when she did, they would all remember the girl they turned into a servant. The house was full that evening. Relatives had come over for dinner, and as always, Amara had done all the work, cooked the food, cleaned the rooms, served the drinks. She moved around quietly, trying not to be noticed. But it didn't matter. Kojo noticed her anyway, and not in a good way. Zena had just returned from a photo shoot, and everyone was praising her. "You're going to be famous," one auntie said. "You look like someone from TV," another added. Amara smiled politely, standing by the wall, her hands still smelling of onions and pepper. Then Kojo's voice cut through the noise. "Why are you standing there looking like that, Amara? Are you jealous because it's not you getting the attention?" The whole room went silent. Everyone turned to look at her. Amara felt her chest tighten. "No, Uncle Kojo," she said softly. "I'm just tired." Something in her tone must have triggered him. Maybe it was the way she refused to look small anymore, even just for that moment. Without warning, Kojo walked up to her and slapped her hard across the face. The sound echoed. Amara staggered back, her cheek burning, her eyes wide with shock. No one said a word. Some looked away. Others looked at her with pity. Her mother's lips trembled, but she stayed seated, frozen. Amara didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, turned around, and walked to her room. That night, while the rest of the house slept, Amara packed her few clothes into a small bag. She folded her notebook, tucked it into the side, and zipped it shut. She looked around the room. Her old books, the tiny window, the cracked wall. This place had held so many of her tears, but it would hold no more. She slipped out of the house quietly, her sandals in her hand to avoid making noise. She didn't say goodbye, not to her mother, not to Zena, and definitely not to Kojo. For the first time, she chose herself. As she walked into the darkness, heart pounding and future unknown, one thing was clear. Something inside her had snapped, not in anger, but in strength. She was done waiting to be seen. Now, she would make the world see her. 5 years had passed since Amara walked out of that house with nothing but a bag and her dreams. She had no plan, no money, just pain and purpose. But pain can become power when you refuse to let it break you. And Amara, she didn't just survive, she rose. Now she stepped out of a black SUV onto the same street in Kumasi where she once cried herself to sleep. But this time, people turned to look, not with pity, but with pride. She was no longer the quiet girl in the corner. She was Amara Mensah, lawyer, best-selling author, and founder of Girls First, an NGO that was changing the lives of young girls across West Africa. Her face had been on TV. Her voice had spoken in front of presidents. But today, she wasn't here for cameras or speeches. She was here for something deeply personal. She looked up at the house, the same house where she'd once been slapped and silenced. The walls still held the same color, but everything felt smaller now. Not because the house had changed, but because she had. She had bought it quietly, through a lawyer. Kojo had no idea. The bank had finally taken it after his business failed, and Amara had waited patiently for the right moment. Now it belonged to her. She walked through the gate slowly, her heels clicking against the ground like music. She placed her hand on the door she once feared to open and smiled. This was her moment. Not for revenge, but for peace, for healing, for power reclaimed. The girl they ignored had become the woman no one could overlook. She turned to her assistant and said softly, "Let's get the welcome papers ready. They'll be here soon." There was calm in her voice, no anger, just quiet strength. In that moment, standing in front of the house where she once felt invisible, Amara realized something. She didn't need an apology. She didn't need validation. She had built herself from the ground up, and now she was the one opening the doors. Not just for herself, but for every girl who had ever been made to feel small. They didn't see her coming, but she had always been on her way. The years hadn't been kind to Kojo and Zina. Kojo's business, once the pride of his life, had crashed after bad deals and unpaid loans. The friends who used to cheer him on had disappeared. The house that once held loud music and parties was now quiet, with cracks in the walls and unpaid electricity bills piling up. He had spent everything trying to keep up a life that no longer existed. Zina, too, had tasted the bitter side of fame. After a few modeling gigs and social media buzz, she got caught up in the fast life, fake friends, online scandals, and bad decisions. Slowly, brands stopped calling. Her name faded from the spotlight, and the same people who once praised her began to mock her online. She tried to hold on, but everything slipped through her fingers. And now, the house, the one place they still had, was under bank threat. They had ignored the warnings until it was too late. One day, a letter arrived saying the house had been sold. No details, just instructions to leave. Kojo, desperate, decided to go to the house and plead with the new owner. Maybe they could stay. Maybe they could explain. He and Zina stood at the gate, looking worn, tired, almost unrecognizable. Kojo knocked once. Then again, the door opened slowly, and there she stood, Amara, beautiful, calm, and powerful. For a moment, no one spoke. Zina's mouth fell open. Kojo blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. The girl they once ignored, hurt, and pushed aside was now the woman standing in front of the house they had lost. Amara didn't smile. She didn't frown either. Her face was unreadable, but her presence said everything. She didn't need to raise her voice. Karma had already spoken. "Can I help you?" she asked gently. Kojo's lips trembled. Zina looked down. They didn't expect this. They never imagined that the girl they called ordinary would one day own the very roof they once denied her. Amara stepped aside, holding the door slightly open, not as an invitation, but as a mirror, a moment to let them see what they had done, not with hate, but with silence. The same silence they once used to erase her. Kojo sat on the edge of the couch, his hands shaking, his eyes full of something Amara had never seen in him before: shame. The proud man who once shouted over her, who never looked her way unless to criticize, was now silent. This time, the silence wasn't cruel. It was heavy, regretful. "I failed you, Amara," he whispered. His voice cracked. "I was blind. I was wrong. Please, forgive me." Amara stood a few steps away, her arms crossed gently. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply looked at him with the kind of calm that comes from years of pain turned into power. She had imagined this moment so many times before, when she was scrubbing floors, eating lust, watching her dreams get tossed aside. But now that it was here, It didn't feel like victory. It just felt sad. Zina sat beside him, her head bowed, cheeks stained with quiet tears. She looked nothing like the girl who once wore glitter and praise. She looked tired, lost, broken in a way only life can break you when everything you were proud of slips away. I don't hate you, Amara said softly, but I can't forget. Kojo looked up at her, searching her face for even a hint of softness. I thought I was doing what was right. I didn't know how much I was hurting you. Amara's eyes didn't blink. A father's silence, she said, can be louder than violence. The room froze at those words. Kojo broke down, covering his face with his hands. The sound of his crying filled the space that once echoed with his commands. Amara didn't move to comfort him. She wasn't that little girl anymore. Then she turned to Zina. I'll pay for your rehab, she said simply. You need help, and you deserve a second chance. Zina looked up, shocked. Why would you do that? Because I know what it's like to feel unseen, Amara replied. She gave Kojo one last glance. But I won't forget how you erased me. I survived without you. I found my own way, and I won't go back to who I was, just to make you feel better. She walked toward the door, pausing just before stepping out. This house used to be your kingdom. Now it's a reminder that every ordinary girl you ignore today might be the woman you answer to tomorrow. Amara didn't just move on. She moved with purpose. After everything she had been through, she knew there were so many girls just like her, girls who were ignored in their own homes, girls who were made to feel small, invisible, unwanted. So she decided to turn her pain into something powerful. She created the Rise Fund, a scholarship program for girls in Kumasi who had been overlooked, silenced, or left behind. She visited schools, talked to teachers, listened to stories. She sat with girls who had no money, no support, and sometimes no hope. And each time, she saw a little bit of her younger self in them. The quiet eyes, the forced smiles, the dreams hidden under beds in old notebooks. Amara gave them more than just money for school. She gave them a chance, a voice, a reason to believe they mattered. Her story spread like wildfire. One day, a young girl posted a video online holding a scholarship letter from Girls First. Because of Amara, I'll be the first in my family to go to university, she said, crying. That video was shared thousands of times. Soon, radio stations, newspapers, and TV shows across Africa were talking about the girl who came back as a queen. They spoke of how Amara had turned the same house she was once kicked out of into a home for change. They showed clips of her speaking at conferences, walking through villages, hugging girls with dreams in their eyes. People called her the voice of the voiceless. Others called her the Phoenix of Kumasi. But Amara didn't care about titles. She just wanted the forgotten girls to know they weren't alone. One night, during an interview, the host asked her, "What made you fight so hard to help others after everything you went through?" Amara smiled gently. "Because I know how it feels when no one fights for you. I became the person I once needed." Her words struck hearts all over the continent. She wasn't just a lawyer, or an author, or a CEO. She was proof. Proof that strength can come from silence, that healing can come from hurt, and that sometimes the girls they forget are the ones who change the world. The studio lights were bright, the cameras rolling, and the whole nation was watching. Amara sat calmly on the interview couch, dressed in a simple but elegant white outfit. There was no gold, no glitter, just grace. The host smiled warmly at her, clearly moved. "Amara, after all that you've been through, what do you want the world to remember about your story?" Amara took a deep breath. She didn't rush. Her voice was soft, but it held the weight of everything she had survived. "They ignored me like I was nothing," she said, looking straight into the camera. "I was that girl in the background, the one no one clapped for, the one they cut out of family photos. I worked, I tried, I begged to be seen, but they always chose someone else." She paused. Her eyes didn't water, but everyone watching could feel the emotion in her words. "But karma," she continued, "karma made sure the world couldn't ignore me now." The crowd in the studio went quiet. It wasn't a line meant to impress. It was truth. It was every girl's silent wish spoken out loud. Amara leaned forward just a little. "And to every girl watching this, who feels like she's not enough, let me tell you this. You don't need the world to pick you. You need to pick yourself. Your worth doesn't depend on who praises you. Your power starts the day you decide to rise." The host sat speechless, holding back tears. Amara smiled gently, like someone who had found peace after walking through fire. She didn't end her story with bitterness. She didn't end it with sorry. She ended it with one word, clear and proud: rise.